the intimacy that you share, like with bandmates that you tour with, it's like nothing. Like I've had relationships, whatever. It's like nothing I've ever experienced in my life.
Begonia, it's very, very nice to meet you. I'm Adam.
Hi.
Hi, this is a podcast about you and your journey in music, and we'll talk about your new album.
Sounds good.
I don't know if you mind talking about Shikami, because you were in that for a little bit of time, I believe.
Yeah, like
right?
8 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I don't mind.
I'd imagine that's kind of probably a big chunk of part of your music. So
Absolutely.
yeah, we don't have to stick on it too long, but I always like to ask first before I poke at some
That's very respectful. That's very surprisingly respectful. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. So first off, where were you born and raised?
Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Okay. Tell me about growing up.
That's where I still
reside
right now. Yeah.
Wow. What's it like there? What's it like growing up there?
It's cold for like 6 to 7 months of the year. It's like kind of winter. It's a vibe.
It's a vibe.
Is it cold there now? It's cold right now. It's pretty cold right now. It's like, yeah, weather-wise, whatever. But I mean, it definitely is the type of place where there's a lot of like freaky artists that live here because it's affordable to be a freaky artist and live here. And B, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like it just kind of like gets the fluff out in some ways too. Like people stay here and during the winter months, they just like go to their basements and like whittle or do whatever, like just make stuff.
Get creative. Sure.
Yeah. And then they come out and it just feels like it's like a resilient crew of people.
Whittle until the weather gets nice.
Like I just picture like a crackling fireplace. Like I don't have one, but just like someone just like whittling. I'm sure there is someone like whittling right now. I'm just looking out my window.
Is the neighbor whittling? We'll have to find out later. Do you come from a musical family?
Not particularly, like music appreciators. Like there's always playing in the house, but my dad is a visual artist and my mom worked at a bank, like a teller.
Oh, cool.
So
dad's an artist.
Dad's an artist. So I grew up kind of, but like still he was very much my dad. Like it was very like, he wasn't like, let's get freaky and like finger paint. So like he was like, and whittle. He was very open. Like my parents were very open with whatever I wanted to do, but I also like grew up pretty religiously as well. So there was always like church music, like influence and stuff like that. But they weren't necessarily super conservative, but I did find myself kind of in conservative like circles in that way from growing up in the church because of for whatever reason. But yeah, no one was particularly musical, but they were very music positive.
Got it. Did you grow up like singing in the church at all?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. At school, like for like musicals and stuff and in the church. Yeah, definitely.
I always find that fascinating with artists. I've interviewed a lot of artists that started off in the church. It's like you have a kind of a guaranteed built-in audience there in the beginning. You know what I mean? Like, people are going to show up.
And if you're a kid too, like no one's allowed to be like, boo to a kid.
Right. No
Come on.
It's great.
You have a built-in audience that has to tell you that you did a good job.
That's awesome. Do you play an instrument or did you start on piano or anything as a young
kid?
Like
I took piano lessons. I started to play guitar when I was like 14. And then I met like my first bandmate, basically. His name's Joey Landreth, and he's like a guitar god. And he was basically when I met him at 15. And I was like, whoa, he started when he was 4. I'm way too old for this. So I kind of like
you aged out at
cut
like
myself
14.
off at the knees a little bit there. Like, who knows? Maybe I could have been a virtuoso by now. No, I play mostly for myself at this point. Like I played on stage a little bit, but I just find that I am the most at home singing, being a singer. I sometimes like compose a little on like piano or guitar, but for the most part, I
just voice.
Yeah.
Cool. So that band that you started, you were what, a high school age?
Yeah.
Did you guys like write your own original songs and did you play out at all?
Well, so we met through the church, like through, and that was more when I started doing more like evangelical kind of like praise and worship, like, yeah, kind of music or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I met them through this mentor who had us all, like, he was older and we were all high school kids in his band. And I met them through that. And then we would go around to different churches, and like, it was, pardon me, my first foray in performing like properly, like on a stage. Learned how to coil cables. I remember like, like all that
under
kind of
over.
Stuff. I was like, yeah, like under over, but you got to like give it a little twist, and then like,
there you go.
Because I didn't want to just be like a singer. Like I wanted to know how to do the dirty work, you know, like I felt very like I had something to prove from the beginning in some way. So I was like, I know how to coil cables. Like, tell me what else I need to know. Like whatever.
Yeah, just learn the whole trade. I mean, that's
cool. So then I met those pals through the Christian music sphere, but then all of us started to kind of like phase out of that a little bit, mentally. And then we still had each other, and we were like, wouldn't it be cool to be in a bar band? How badass would that be?
Did you form a badass bar band?
Yeah, we like started learning covers. Like it started mostly from like covers of our favorite artists, and like Joey, like learning all these blues riffs, like just ripping from like Stevie Ray Vaughan and like Robin Ford and stuff. And then we were doing like Stevie Wonder stuff and like Erykah Badu stuff and Joni Mitchell stuff, and like just like a whole wide variety. And we had this weekly gig every Wednesday at a bar called Hooligans, and we would play from like 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. for like $35.
Oh
and
my
like,
gosh.
And I didn't drink really then either. So people would just be like wasted, but I was like, felt like we had made it in a way because we had a gig. Like,
yeah. And a like, regular gig.
It felt like a big deal.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And it was such a teeth cutting kind of moment. Like now, if someone was like, hey, I have this great opportunity for you to play Hooligans Pub for $35 a week for like 4 hours of work, or however many hours that is, like of work. Yeah. I'd be like
5 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be like, no, like disgusting. But
yeah, come even anywhere, right? Come sing for 5 hours. I got $35.
Well, exactly. But then it's like, that's what I'm so thankful for, like the greenness and curiosity of like being a kid in that way.
You're probably just stoked to get paid. You're like, we're getting paid.
Exactly. Stoked to have a mic. Like,
yeah.
My parents would come there every Wednesday. My mom would have one glass of white wine. My dad would have one beer. We played the same stuff every week, but they were like, you never know. Like maybe Joey will be a different solo, or like someone else will come up, or like whatever. It's like, it felt like and like we amassed like a small following, like in Winnipeg, and we'll play other bars. And we started kind of writing our own music as well. Like that was and recorded like a few songs, like made little demos that like I would burn CDs, write on them, pass them out at the show, like that kind of vibe.
That's cool. And a couple of were your own songs. Would you play those during those sets too?
Oh yeah.
Like sprinkle them in?
Oh yeah, for sure. And sometimes I'd be like, we wrote this, and other times I'd be like, I don't know how this is gonna go over. So I just like be like, okay, next song.
Yeah,
this is a cover of, but no one's listening anyways. Like this is a cover of, hit it, yeah. Like whatever.
Yeah, they're just stoked to be drunk and dancing around.
Oh my gosh, one night I remember this man. Maybe this is just my memory deceiving me, but this man in like, I think like a top hat or something, like came to our show and was like, you guys are so great, and just like started throwing money on stage, like throwing money at us. We're like, oh, like didn't know what to do. We're like teenagers. So we're like, oh my gosh, is this allowed? Like I was like looking at my mom, like, is this allowed? But he like had a top hat and was like super rich. And he said we were going to be famous, but we didn't hear from him after that. But he did give us like $500, which was like,
yeah, and you made it, right? I mean, come on now, that worked out.
Okay.
He knew.
That was it. We went to McDonald's after that. We were like, woo.
Damn.
Big celebration.
Yeah, I bet. Hopefully the ice cream machine wasn't broken that day.
Oh, always.
Such a bummer. But I was gonna say, so from that band that you were playing in, like at what point do you meet the other girls and then inform Shikami, right?
Yeah, Shikami. Yeah, like I'm the anglophone of the group. I always say it many different ways, but okay. So they were like kind of like a generation older than me, and I had heard about a lot of the singers in that band, like in a different band prior. And I had heard about them kind of growing up in the scene, being like, oh yeah, they're in this other vocal group. And I'd heard
it was just like a acapella group, correct?
Yeah, Madrigal, they were called. And then through the grapevine, I heard that like one of the singers was going on to do something else. So they needed a sub. So I was going to audition MySpace. I messaged them on MySpace. I'm like, okay, I'm going to like, I've heard these things. Like, I'd love to audition to be a sub, like, cause I just wanted to sing. And like, I was just and I respected them so much. And I had no like singing mentors really like in that way. Mm-hmm. And so I had an audition and I'm on my way to the bus stop and they call me and they're like, you know what, we actually don't need you anymore. So don't bother like coming for the audition. So I was like, okay, I won't. And then what I hear later is that their band actually broke up and they didn't know me. So they weren't going to tell me that their band was breaking up, but like that the band broke up. So that day that I was like on my way to the bus stop, they were just like, well, there's no point in bringing her here because we're not even going to do anything anyways. But
so this was that different band. This was that first band you said.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is their other band.
This is their other band. So they had all these contracts to fulfill like with their agencies. And I think from what I gleaned afterwards is they begged them like, keep us on. We're going to put something else together. Like, cause 3 of the girls still wanted to do stuff. 4 other of the girls went off to do other things. Whatever.
Oh, wow. They're quite a group. That's a lot of people.
There was like 8 people. And maybe I just described 7. Then maybe there's 7 people. I don't really know. But there were a lot of people. And so a few of them split off and were like, we still want to do this. They still want to keep their contracts. The fire was there. But then they were like, we need one more singer. For whatever, like all of this, I don't know all the arbitrary reasoning behind it.
But you made it in.
But I made it in. They started coming to my gigs, like in the back of the bar, just kind of watching. And then they'd leave. And I had another friend who was like, I think they're checking you out, like
scouting you,
like they're scouting you, like to be a part of your. And then we went for coffee, and sure enough, they were like, "We have a gig in LA." Like, like, you know, like flashy, like we have a gig in LA next month that we have to fulfill from our last contract. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have a gig at O'Donnell's pub next month, like with my bar band. Like, what am I going to do? Like, it felt like, oh my gosh.
You're betraying the bar band.
I had to make this huge decision.
Right.
And it tore my 19-year-old brain in half. Like, it was like, here are these people that I had come up with, that I had loyalty to, that were my age, that we were crunching through it like together. And then I have these people that are doing this thing with a promise of travel, which was something I was so interested in, and like touring, which I had never done. And like, this promise of this mystery future with people I didn't really know. And my dad was like, what do they want from you? Like thinking they're like pyramid scheme people or something, like whatever, like not trusting
come back
them.
Selling like shakes or something.
Yeah, exactly. Vitamins or some shit. But no, then I had another kind of mentor in my life who was like, if you don't take that opportunity, you're dumb. Like you have to just like, this is the time. Like I would hate for you to look back and be playing at like Finn McHugh's pub or whatever and be so sad that you didn't just like see, like, because like to not let your loyalty kind of take over like the smart decision like for your life or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it all turned out okay. Like that, it really like crushed that relationship for a while with my bandmates, and I had to deal with that. But now years have passed. Joey Landreth lives a few blocks away from me. He tours with another band called the Bros Landreth, like the bass player I'm friends with. Like we're all, it was like time.
Yeah, he was. They're not. No one's gonna carry that, right? Wait. No, like, everyone. I can't believe you left our bar band.
But everyone was better off. It felt so serious in the moment, though. Like teenage problems, like teenage hormones. Like it felt like the end of the world. And now, but then everyone went off and did their thing, and it felt like meant to be, and whatever.
Right. Yeah. So once you join those ladies and you play LA, like that must have been big, right? You get to Los Angeles, and I was watching interviews with you all and stuff. You got to be in like part of that. That must have been such a cool experience.
It was so cool. And I was just at first, like for the first few years, I feel like I was just on the ride because I didn't know my head from my feet. Like I was just kind of like, whoa, like they give me like I didn't know the business acumen like that. Like I didn't know the ins and outs of like how to make it work. I just knew they told me, like we rehearsed all the time. Like we were together all the time, but I wasn't like the boss. Like I didn't I was a part of making decisions, but I didn't know where the business card was. Like I didn't know I didn't know who booked the hotels. Like I was just like, woo.
Yeah, you just kind of, yeah, which makes, I mean, they had like already been doing it right, and they know the contracts in and out, and you're just kind of probably learning at that point.
Totally. And I felt like my head was exploding with knowledge. Like we just were right in there, and we were in a scene like with this agent that then kept us on for a period of time as this new group. We were in this interesting kind of like folk festival, international festival scene. Mm-hmm. And there are so many of those freaky festivals all over North America. Like in like, think of like every little city in California, in Northern California you've ever heard of. Like there are just so many like,
yeah.
And it was so fun though. Like it was people I would have never met, places I would have never gone. Like, because we were this like cute girls in a folk group, like doing this thing. Like, so we got all these like really cool opportunities and had so many unique adventures, like as a result of being in that like niche kind of scene. Mm-hmm. It was interesting.
Wow. And you ended up doing that for 8 years, you said.
Yeah. And I mean, midway through, we were like, we want to be cooler. So we were like, let's do badass music, like instead of cute music or whatever. So then we kind of like changed our sound a little bit. And that's when also my head started poking out of the sand, being like, hey, I understand this a bit better now. And like, I started taking on more responsibility, and like, we were self-managed like near the end. And I was doing a lot of that work as well. So I felt kind of like really clear-eyed of like what was going on for the first time, and was like, oh, this is a crazy life. And then, we were doing it for a long time. We really loved each other. I think we wanted to stay in love with each other and not like, there comes a time sometimes like in bands like that, and it's really hard to say goodbye, but it's like expired meat or something. It's like, maybe it could last like a little bit longer, but like you will get sick. Like if you try to eat that, it's like there's an expiry date on meat, especially like, like certain things, like you could stretch it a bit, but like meat, like, you don't want to really go past that. Yeah. Like you see the date. It's like, why would you want to make yourself sick? Like that meat is great right before the expiry date. Like that's what I felt like in the band. It was just like, we love each other and we do good work, but we're kind of there's a bit of an expiry date here. That is clear. So we could push through that because no one's willing to be the one to say it's over. And it took us a long time to just be like mutually like, it's nobody's fault.
Right. You're just like in this relationship where you're like, both people want out, and you're just like, okay, I'm not going to be the one to do it.
It's like a funky ass marriage. Like it is so, the intimacy that you share, like with bandmates that you tour with, it's like nothing. Like I've had relationships, whatever. It's like nothing I've ever experienced in my life.
Right. I mean, you're with them 24/7 pretty much, traveling.
Oh yeah.
In tight knit quarters. And
And you just have to like take deep breaths sometimes, being like, okay, is this a fundamental problem, or am I just annoyed at that person when they chew? Like, is this something that like, do I have to sit them down and be like, look, you're hurting my feelings? Or do I have to take a breath whenever they eat a salad and leave like the van or something? Like, like what is actually like reality? Sometimes anyone can drive you nuts. Like,
no, 100%.
And you are probably driving someone else nuts as well.
Of course. Like, right.
I'm sitting there being like, I don't do anything annoying, but it's like,
Meanwhile, like 3 other girls are all talking shit, and
they're texting each other like, what a bitch. Like,
right, of course,
she never shuts up about herself.
That's just how the world works. But so once that kind of ended, when did you start Begonia? Pretty quickly after, like, when did this project start?
Like this project started like 2016. I feel like I put out my first song.
Okay.
It started pretty swiftly. Like we had our last tour dates 2015, and I was just sitting there feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not ready to be done, like being out there, being on tour. And I know at the time I was just like, I think if I stop and like have a grieving period, that I don't know if I'll start again. Like I was nervous, like to take that time to process. And it's revealed itself in different ways to me that like maybe taking more processing time is like cute and smart and stuff, like, as I say, but like at the time I was like full steam ahead, didn't even really know what I was doing. And was I starting another band? Was I doing a solo project? Like, didn't really know, but just knew that I couldn't stop. Like, so I had some other people that I would sing with or write with, like on the side of that band. And with Chick Emin, it was like, we were all full equal members, full equal songwriters. So say I'd be home writing 10 songs a month or whatever, bring it to the band, and maybe one or two would get on an album. That was like just so I would have all these other songs in a cupboard somewhere, like just hanging out, like not knowing where they would go. So then that's when I started like opening the cupboards up and being like, what's in here?
Oh, okay. So some of the songs were written for the other group, and it just
just idly written, and they didn't fit anywhere because like I was in like that band, and then casually I was in another like kind of like alt country kind of band at home, like more bar band stuff, but would write songs for them too when I would be home. Then I was in another more like electronic-y kind of bedroom project, like with a co-writer now who I write almost all my music with still.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So then I kind of then found my footing, like with Matt Schellenberg and Matt Peters. They're two of like my best friends that were in another band called Royal Canoe. Now they go by Dead Men, and they're like a production duo. Some of my closest friends, they were like some of my biggest encouragers of just like, let's do this. I had a few people in my corner that were like, let's do this. This band is done. You're not done. Like, who kind of picked me up and were like, let's do it. So that really motivated me to just keep going. And I would write songs with them. And I had like a couple $1,000s for a budget to make an EP, but I was like, I don't want to wait. I want to start playing shows. I'm just going to put this together and maybe it's not going to feel perfect, but it's like, this is what I have. And I have to just like start this wheel somewhere.
And is that when you recorded Lady in Mine?
Yeah. Wow. And it took a lot of like, pushing through like supposed perfectionism or whatever. Cause it was like, okay, I only want to put stuff out there. And I hear a lot of like younger artists struggling with this too. It's like, I only want to put stuff out there when it's perfect, when it's done, when it's like, and I'm all about patience with the process. Like, I'm not all about like, put a song on TikTok when it's not done. No, I sometimes do that. I don't know. I like patience with the process though. And I don't like that sense of urgency where it's like, put a song out just because you need to put the content out. It's like, put it out if you feel it, but like, you can wait. But with that specifically, it's like, I needed to put something out. I wasn't going to wait till I was perfect. I kept thinking of other artists that I loved, and I could look back on their discography and maybe their very first album wasn't the most polished, best thing. But if they wouldn't have put that out, there's no evolution. Like, right. I don't know. I just kept like, that's like me talking to myself in the mirror. Like, you just have to start somewhere.
Were you nervous at all putting out, like, I mean, the first single you put out was just a standalone single, right? Gun Has No Trigger. And then when you did that, was it like, okay, are people like, were you nervous about the fan base from the other group at all? Or were you not even thinking about that? Were you just like, okay, I know I want to keep going. I'm just going to put this out and see.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about it too much. Like, I knew that it was going to be different, but I also knew that I came from that place organically. So it's not like I was trying to be like, who were they? I don't even know them. Like, whatever. It wasn't that dramatic that I was trying to distance. Like, one of my bandmates from Chick Emin sang backgrounds in the first video I ever did. Like, oh, wow. I was like still feeling very like sentimental kind of about some of that too. Mm-hmm. But I remember the first like live video that I filmed, like, of Gun Has No Trigger, Juniper, and maybe Out of My Head. And I had all these like amazing outfits picked out, like sparkles and like flash and like more stuff that I would wear now. But I was so petrified of like coming on too strong or like being too, I don't know, like visually loud or like whatever, because I was so used to the uniformity of like being in a group and that almost being like a shield in some way, like, and not having to come out on my own. So then like in the video, I end up dressing all in black. Like, I look like someone's church mother and like I have like a long skirt on and like a black like top. And I'm like, ooh, like just like church mother. And in the background, like what I could see with all these like sparkly coats and these prints or whatever. But I was like, no, like I brought them all, but then I was just like too terrified. So I was like, all black, which is like, whatever, if all black is your thing, but it's just like, it wasn't, but I freaked out.
Right. Yeah. Because you kind of have with the band or the group, you're all kind of the same. You're part of a puzzle. So I don't know. You're like,
oh, totally. And like you'd wear something maybe a bit freaky, and then someone would be like, hey, that doesn't really match.
Right.
I'm wearing, and I'd be
go
like,
out and be like, hey, not only am I going to wear this, but all eyes are on me anyway. So yeah, I could see how that could be a bit, hard to freaky. I like that. Well, Juniper did awesome. Tell me about that song, like just having, success with your own project, right? Like right off the first EP. Yeah,
no, that was amazing. And it was like my manager had just kind of started his managing career like before me with the Bros Landreth, but was just kind of like, I was like, I think the second or third artist that he had on his roster. So like he was also building, and I really trusted him. I knew him. He was an agent for Chic Gamin before. Mm-hmm. Him and I were just in his apartment. It was just the two of us. I'm like, should I post this? Like, like just like feeling, and he's like, yeah, post it. Like it was just the two of us, like both building our careers, like at the same time. It was like a very nerve-wracking, but like magical little time. And then a producer from CBC heard Juniper and picked it up and started playing it on the radio. And that was the first time that I had anything kind of like independent, like on national, like Canadian radio. And then it was like on the charts and it went to #1. And it was like,
that's huge.
Just from in my, like, the internet is so wild like that, where you're just like, have this thing that you work on forever that just turns into this tiny little like MP3 or WAV file that just like lives on a computer, and you're like, what the fuck? And then it just went to these distances that I never anticipated, which was so fun.
Having that happen, like getting your song on the radio and then like charting and all these things that are going on with this song, that must have changed a little bit. I mean, as far as your path in life, I mean, was that like, oh wow, like all this stuff's happening now, like, and it was off my own song independently, like
for sure. Oh my gosh, yeah, like I live with imposter syndrome every day of my life. So no matter what, there's always this like gremlin inside of me being like, are you sure? Like whatever. But like
you don't deserve this.
Exactly.
That's how I feel too.
Well, exactly. It's like there's a hamster living its truth in my mind. But like I did feel very uplifted. Absolutely. Right. And it did feel then like legitimized in a way. Like and I would always say to myself, like, I don't need any like external, and I still whatever say that like praise to like make me like an artist or whatever, but like it fucking helps, like
right, having that validation would help, right?
It helps so much, like to just like
one. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
you go for it.
It just like to feel that there are actually people listening,
right,
is incredible. Like, yes, I will make art no matter what. I'll make it in my basement. I will make it. Feels like a Dr. Seuss poem I'm starting or something. I will make it in a hat. I will make it as a cat. But like, I will make it no matter what. But like, it's so much nicer to share it and just to feel like, I don't know. It just to have that connection, like, is everything to me.
Yeah, like having that validation, right? I mean, if you were doing it, okay, you're like, okay, I'm going to put out my own record and see what that does, and no one cares, and then you put out another one and no one cares. At what point are you like, maybe I should try something a bit, I don't know, like I would imagine after a certain amount of time you just it would be discouraging. Then you're like, okay, maybe I should be doing something else, or maybe I should join a band again or whatever. But to have that like validation on the first EP that you released, that's huge. No,
it was awesome. And then I had to make a band like to play with me.
Was that difficult?
Yeah, it was so intimidating because I had never really, like, I'd been a band leader in various like bar bands or whatever, but like I'd never really been like a leader of my own project in that way. So I remember we had a show for like the Winnipeg Jazz Fest or something was our first gig. And I just brought together a lot of my pals or like people that I trusted just to like play the music with me. And I didn't even know, like, I didn't even have a full set. So I was like doing some covers. I don't even remember what I did. But then we had a rehearsal at this rehearsal space and I was like puking, like I was sick. I was ill like beforehand because I was like, I can't be the leader. Why am I the leader? I don't want to. Can someone else be the point leader? I can't. I don't have any money to pay anyone else to be the leader, but I can't possibly be the leader. Like people, like it was so. And I still get a little anxious about rehearsals, but like not as much as I used to. It's cuter now, I guess. It wasn't so cute.
Well, when you and then you put out like a live album, but also Fear was your first album, right? I mean, and that one you had success on that one as well. Like, what would you say? Well, like was before we talk about your new album, was there like a milestone or something that you can recall from that being like another like big victory from that? Obviously, one of those.
Getting nominated for a Juno.
Oh yeah, that's huge.
Having the opportunity to like expand kind of my tour horizons a little bit, like more into North America and like people showing up to shows. Like that was amazing. Like I played 5 consecutive shows in Winnipeg at this one venue because they just kept selling out. And like it was amazing. It was amazing. It was surprising to me. Like I didn't understand. That was right before the pandemic too. So it was this amazing like thing that we got to capture that I didn't even know would be as incredible as it was. Yeah, there's a lot of like fun milestones and just like acquiring more confidence, more like just doing more things, like just more experience. That's the word I was looking for. Just like feeling like I was pretty anxious though when that album came out, to be fair, but like, and maybe that's a running theme, but I was just kind of in a different snack bracket then because I had achieved like a certain level of success with Lady in Mind. Then it felt like I was like legitimized a bit more even to like grant funding systems, like people, because in Canada, like that's like a huge thing.
Oh yeah. Canada, I think New Zealand does it as well. Like the only 2 countries.
It's amazing. It's allowed me to do so many things. So then that was awesome to level up that a little bit because I could make more music videos, like just do things that I'd always wanted to do that I was just like a peanut, like scraping together little peanut shards, whatever. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you know, it was just like more difficult.
Yeah. With that the Juno nomination must have been unreal. Do you remember the day you received that news?
Well, and it was during lockdown time that I received the news.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, damn. So did you have to do the Junos like this, like a Zoom Juno?
Yeah,
oh man, I interviewed somebody else that was nominated. I can't remember off the top of my head that year as well.
I appreciated it enough because I did lose. So it was kind of fun to just be like, goodbye, close the computer and then just be like, well, that's over. Like, and I had a girlfriend that came over and she's like, I'm spraying champagne on your head, whether you win or lose. And then I was outside just like she like had a mask on, like from a distance, she's like sprayed champagne. My neighbor came out and was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I just lost a Juno. Like it was fun in that way because my headspace was so all over the place that it was kind of nice to not have to be like, how's your career? Like to random people like all night. Like, it would have been so fun to be there for all the pomp and circumstance, like the parties and all that stuff. But
I bet that's probably a lot of it, right? Being able to go and, you know.
Yeah, and like get a fancy dress and like whatever. But then also, again, it was so nice when it's like, you lost. I was like, bye, close the computer. Like, didn't have to even like, I'm like, goodbye. Sounds cute. So did you. Bye. Like, just like whatever.
That's hilarious. So, I mean, having all that momentum going, and like you said, you sold out 5 nights, and then all this is happening, and then the pandemic happens, and you're like, oh, that must have been like deflating as far as, you know, you're going, and then like the wind in your sails is like,
yeah. And everyone around me was like, this is your time. Oh, this is your time. And I fucking like, I love the encouragement, but sometimes I'm just like, stop telling me that. Like, and then of course it like wasn't like because everything shut down. And then, but at first I was on the phone with my manager, like weekly, kind of having updates, being like, I'm still ready for anything, man. You tell me when we're doing stuff. Like, I'm still ready, man. And then like months would pass and I'm like, yeah, man, still ready for whatever. And then like, finally it was just like, everything's canceled indefinitely. And I was like, I'm ready to cry now. Like, my optimism could only go so far at a certain point.
Yeah, I think that's how everybody felt, right? It was like, all right, 2 weeks, we're gonna flatten the curve, and then it was like, okay, this is going a little longer. Okay, now we're way past what we thought this was going to be.
Where are you based out of?
I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, but I'm originally from San Diego, California, but I moved here about 2 years ago in the middle of the pandemic.
Okay. That's huge.
Yeah, we love it. But were you writing this record then during that time, or
at first no, like at first there were all those like memes going around and shit being like, oh, can't wait for what the artists are gonna produce, like Shakespeare wrote King Lear, like whatever, and I was like, like just like whatever, like can't wait for what you produce, like sourdough bread is great, and like I was just, oh
yeah, I forgot about the sourdough bread phase.
I got so depressed, like and so it was so cute to think like, oh yeah, now I'm gonna rip up my guitar and like make a Joni Mitchell like as like opus, but I was like, I'm just like trying to survive, like actually, like, and again, like my optimism was cute for a minute and then it just went so far and then I crashed really hard, like to the point where people around me were like, we are worried about you. And I like pride myself generally in having like a relatively good poker face in that sense. So I was like, oh shit, well, if people are saying that, then I'm like, I don't even care anymore. Like then I'm just letting it all go down. My manager was like, so like whatever, but like I just set up like if you're not doing anything today, like I have a therapist like who's ready to talk to you, like
10 a.m. just be there 15 minutes early.
All good, like no pressure, but you're definitely going. And no, I did all that. I did all the things. I had to work hard though, like to get out of that hole. So that took me a year probably.
Yeah, I bet it could be uninspiring. Some people were like, it was inspiring, and then others like, how inspired could you be not really living at all, right?
Oh my gosh. And also just the pain in the world. Like I would wake up every day just feeling like, yeah, really bad.
Oh yeah.
Just like
it numbers on the TV. I'm like, I can't even handle it.
The numbers on the TV, like all the shit going on in your corner of the world with like George, like the light of George, just all like watching it, and also the access on on my phone. Like I was plugged in, and I was already addicted enough to social media, but it was just I was plugged in like from the minute I woke up to the minute I went to bed. I had nothing. I didn't have remote work. Like there was no distractions. Like that was no distractions from the ultimate distraction. Like I was just like plugged in to a point that like obviously it's good to be concerned, connected, and understanding what's going on in the world and like to do what you can, and I still believe that, but there was a certain point where it wasn't even productive or I wasn't learning anything. I was just in a spiral of death and sadness. So it was like, okay, how can I like take in what's going on, be a helpful citizen, be mindful of my impact, and live.
Right. And once you kind of I mean, that's 100% I can relate to that. And then once you get to a certain point, was it like, okay, I like, was there something that kind of sparked a song, or like what kind of got you?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things. Like I started some cool medication. I started some cool therapy, like stuff that works for me, that I'm not saying that's what works for everyone, but it definitely worked for me. Like, and I understand, it just like my motivation just kind of took an uptick, I guess, a little bit. And the guys that I always write with, they were always there being like, we're ready. Whenever you're ready, we're ready for you. Like, if you feel like you want to start, and we like, before the pandemic, we had a few different writing sessions throughout, like when I'd be touring for the other record, even before the other record came out, like we're always just like creating things. So I had some things to pull from before. And then when I was feeling kind of like capable, because there was no time limit really on it, it wasn't like this, like we just created a schedule basically. Once I felt like
wasn't as much pressure, right?
Yeah.
It's just, we have really no one's going anywhere or touring yet, so we kind of have endless time at this point.
Absolutely. And I mean, shit kept getting canceled. Like we would book studio time, and then someone was a close contact, or like we would do it, and then someone like, so we had to be very flexible with expectations as well. Like even if we had a sense of urgency, there was always something that was some sort of barrier to like getting it done whenever we thought it would be done. So this record probably finished a year later than I anticipated, once I started understanding that I was making a record. Like, but at the same time, yeah, we just, as I'm sure many people had to learn, it's just like how to adapt to change and be okay with it and not hold on to those plans too hard.
Right. Was there something that like on this album, because you had more time to sit with it, where did you find yourself like overthinking anything? Like, oh, like we have so much time, like you're gonna sit there and tinker with like something very minimal, maybe that you wouldn't if there was like more of a time crunch on.
Always the thing though. I'm like the Mats, I call the Mats, dead men who I work with. They are tinker town. Like they are tinker town. Like they tinker to, like I would have to like get into the room and be like, stop trying to find a snare sound. Like it's been 3 hours. Like just like we need to take a walk outside. Like they're tinker boys. So I would, which I love because I'm not the tinker town. Like I'm like, let's do this in one take, see what we can do. I have perfectionist tendencies in certain ways, but I do like to just get shit done. So it's a nice little balance. So yeah, like the time, but I mean, that's just how we work anyways. Like little tinker boys, like we are.
Nothing that didn't change.
Not really. Like, yeah, maybe there's like, no, we still like, they're very good at like organizing sessions and stuff too. And I follow suit where it's like, we have schedules, whether we need them or not. We make arbitrary deadlines that sometimes we hit, sometimes we don't, depending on like literal, like natural causes. Like, and then like, yeah, there's always a bit of tinkering. And that's like the essence with any record at any moment in time. It is always difficult to figure out when you're done. Like when a song is done, like you can get really in your head and be like, oh my gosh, this one violin line, like if it was just like this, then the song would be perfect. Whereas you show it to your closest friends and like, no one gives a fuck. Like no one notices. Like it doesn't matter to the integrity of the song, but you can get so caught up in,
life
is a life. I understand.
Exactly. Most people aren't even going to notice, but you would be like, oh my God.
Well, like up all night. Like
yeah.
Just, over the song,
over like, something. Yeah.
Put that clap in or not? One clap, like up all night.
Well, you're doing a tour to support it. You've done about half of it, Kurt. So
yeah,
far.
Like a quarter. Yeah, like half. I don't know.
Yeah, and then it's starting up again next week, I believe.
Yeah, April 10th in Minneapolis is the first date.
How's it going thus far? Has it been fun to get back out?
Oh yeah.
Especially for this record.
I always love touring. I mean, the highs are high and the lows are low. That is the vibe, especially in my cute little snack bracket, because I'm not famous enough that like we go to the US and like people are like blowing down the doors. Like I never know what to expect. So it's like, sometimes I'm like, oh, because I try not to ask for ticket counts because I like to just like be surprised. And so then I'll show up at some venues and I'm like, oh my gosh, a little over 100 people here, win of the century. Like I always say to the guys, 15 or less, maybe I'm stressed. 15 or more, and then I try to find a rhyme that applies, that's positive. Like 15 or more, we are happy, something. Like, I don't know, whatever. But in Canada, things are like, I'm playing venues that I never thought that I would be able to play. So it's like, we play this kid and then we go down to the States, and some places people come out, other places like Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, there are like 10 people there. It's like, you just never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, I think that's just how it is. I always found it interesting, like Arkells are massive in Canada.
Arena Stadium in Hamilton. They play multiple nights at the stadium.
Yeah, and they played, I remember in San Diego when I first kind of got hip to them, I worked at a radio station and they played like this little tiny venue. And people were like, oh my, I can't believe they're playing here. Like in Canada, they're playing like stadiums. It's just so wild to see like the dynamic.
It's hard not to let it get to your head a little bit.
Yeah, I bet.
It's hard. Like the mental, it's like it's such a mental game, like touring right now. I still have the joy and the curiosity and the romanticism of it enough to get me through. And the guys that I tour with are so supportive and sweet and the best band I've ever had, like players wise, like they're just like, they're amazing. I feel very lucky. Like there are at every level, like I've been at the level lower and seen where I'm at now and been like, if only I could get there, like how would life be different? And now I'm there and I see a higher level and I'm like, if only I could get there. It's always going to be like that. So I'm trying so hard in this era to just be like, wow, this is awesome. And still be like a business-minded person enough to be critical and make changes where there needs to be change. And like I'm not just apathetic, but I just want to enjoy the process. Mm-hmm. So this is my life. Like I want to enjoy the process, like not always be looking above, like at what it could be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have one more question for you, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for doing
that. Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for the thoughtful questions.
Yeah, I could see how that would. You're always shooting for a higher thing. It's like if you would have told yourself, probably even when you put out, Juniper, like, oh, you're gonna have a song on the radio, and that's gonna be this and that. You're like, that'll be it. But when you get there, you're like, this is great, but what about
exactly? Like always striving, and I think there's something like good to be said about that. Like I don't have just like one goal that then everything will be realized and I can just be done. Like
right.
That's like life too. Right. It's like I'm not just like, oh, I did it.
Right. Especially creatives. I've heard somebody say, it's just you never arrive in music. You never arrive. Like you'll always be striving, right?
That's the trick that you can play on yourself that I think is a sad game that I understand when like you can trick yourself into thinking that there are these arrival points, and there are many arrival points, definitely. Mm-hmm. But if you don't enjoy the journey, but it's true. It's just like you're fooling yourself. Like if you don't have humor, you're fooling yourself. Like, and you're making life so much harder than it needs to be. For
sure. No, I have one more quick question. You're kind of answering it now, so I'm just going to ask it. If you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Yeah. I mean,
enjoy the ride.
enjoy the ride. When you're first starting though, just go out and play. Like go to venue, like look in your paper or wherever, see a venue that you think a band is playing that you like and go there and hang out. Like meeting people and the hang of it all is something that like you don't necessarily learn like in school, but it's like just being around, like creating community is so important in like finding your voice, figuring out how to do things, being inspired. So it's like a way to create community is putting yourself out there, and it's terrifying, but like just, it doesn't have to all happen right away. Just like keep playing, try to enjoy it. The hustle is so real when you're first starting though. It's like you have to want it. You have to have that sense of urgency, and it has to be in you, not because you want to be famous, but because you love it. Because if you just want to be famous, it is going to be a very sad world for you to live in if that's all that you're after. But if you love it, it's still sad sometimes, but you get a different fulfillment out of it. I believe. Bringing it back.